We are losing revenue now, right? And we'll continue to lose that revenue through the next 4.5 years.
Do you agree with the estimate? It's about $1.7 billion to replace the bridge?
That is what we believe is consistent.
Agree, $350 million in insurance?
Yes, that is the current insurance policy.
I think we could always do better speaking to Congress, to the administration, and to the public in plainer English. The concrete dolphins that were out there protecting Pier 17 and 18 and the fendering were clearly not sufficient for vessels of that size.
When you changed the designation for the bridge to the interstate highway system, under what authority did you do that?
Under the authority of the Federal Highway Administration, there's a process.
We're asking for $33 million to recoup what we spent on steel and concrete.
So what factors do you think Congress should consider when reducing the required cost share for an ER project?
Thank you, Ranking Member Capito, for that question. I think it is a fair question to ask, and I think that when you look at some of the examples, both that Senator Cardin has mentioned or that we've used in the past, I think it is scope and scale of a disaster that would, as Secretary Wiedefeld just mentioned, overwhelm state and local agencies' ability to respond. So in Delaware, when we had our bridge disaster, when I served as secretary, it was in the tens of millions of dollars, and it was something that financially we were grateful for the Federal Highway Administration, but it was not a debilitating impact to our state economy had we had to have come up with $10 or $20 million. But in the case of a $1.7 billion bridge replacement with corresponding loss of toll funding that has impacts on their transportation program, I think that's where you get into a scope and scale sense of where the federal government may need to come in, because the 10 or 20% cost share becomes a quite sizable number at that point.
The $56 million that you collect on that bridge is used for the maintenance and upkeep of all of the projects in the state, correct? The tunnels and that bridge. So it's not exclusively dedicated to that bridge, correct?
Correct. Is for the Transportation Authority, which runs all of our toll facilities only, not the general highway system.
Okay. So if you took, say, a 30-year payback plan to the federal government for the 10%, you would be taking probably a 10% off of that toll revenue that the state of Maryland could use if the cost share that exists now could use to pay back the American taxpayer the cost of the rebuild of the bridge, right?
You could,
if that
was
the direction that we decided to go. Why is it wrong to assume, if you're the American taxpayer, that since you have a dedicated source of revenue there, that over time you would not be asked to pay the 10% cost share that Maryland would have to bear?
I think
make the argument there.
Sure. No, I think there's some other factors here. One is we are losing revenue now, right? And we'll continue to lose that revenue through the next 4.5 years, is what we're projecting right now. So we're losing those dollars now. The other part of that is, in effect, we are costing businesses and people every day by the delay of this bridge being built, by any delay, potential delay of this bridge being built. So all those are added costs that, in effect, we're trying to cover now so we can get this bridge done as quickly as we can.
There's a significant part of the traffic that will avoid paying tolls for the next couple years, costing the toll facilities those revenues that were projected. Now, do you have a way of recovering that?
No. So it's adding costs to us because as that traffic moves on the Beltway, that increases our operating costs. So for instance, we have put emergency response units out there because the slightest hiccup in the system has an exponential impact on congestion up and down the Northeast Corridor. So we put in operating costs for that. We're anticipating higher maintenance costs due to the heavier traffic, because these are the oversized vehicles and any hazardous materials now have to take this 25-mile detour on the Baltimore Beltway. So those are all additional costs that we now will incur for several years, 4+ years.
And I know this is still early days, so I'm not going to come back and hold you to the penny on this, but do you agree with the estimate? It's about $1.7 billion to replace the bridge?
Yes, Senator, thank you for that. That is what we believe is consistent.
Great. And then we've established, and I think you agree, $350 million in insurance?
Yes, that is the current insurance policy.
Okay, so, and we've also talked about maybe some of the litigation claims.
My question, General Spellman, if I may, from the Corps' perspective, what are some of the key takeaways from the recovery and salvage effort that could help the federal government think maybe more strategically about emergency response moving forward? And looking back, what do you think went particularly well, and what do you think might have gone better? I like to say everything I do, I know I can do better, and maybe what have we learned and what could we have done better?
Yes, sir. First, I wanted to just say thank you for those generous words. In terms of best practices, I'll just mention 2 items. First is the importance of authorities that Congress gives to us. I'll mention emergency reprogramming authority that you give the Chief of Engineers. It comes in Section 101 every year of our Energy and Water Appropriations Act. And then for the Navy, the Salvage Facilities Act. All of those allowed us to move fast on this. So within a couple of hours of the bridge coming down, Colonel Pinchason was able to exercise those authorities and our interagency agreements, and we had tools and people ranging from New York, New Jersey, all the way from Galveston, Texas, sailing toward Baltimore. Incredibly helpful. The second one I'll mention, sir, is leadership. And as you know, within hours, the president called me on this, and his team stayed in touch throughout. The Secretary of Defense called me that morning.
Did you say the president called you?
I'm sorry, sir.
Did you say the president called you?
Yes, sir, on my cell phone.
Does he call you often?
Not too often.
How did he get your number? Go right ahead.
Sir, Governor Moore was absolutely open to us and shared with us anything that we needed. I was to call him personally. And there were things we needed from Maryland, and we got it right away. I would just say having that level of access and that commitment, absolutely critical. I think one of the lessons we continue to learn, we continue to work hard on this, is during times like this when things are moving fast, always working to speak in precise and our best plain English. I said something about midway through this that caused some friction in the state, and certainly with the families. At the time, we still had 2 missing workers. I was asked in a national media interview how we were going to take the remaining section of Span 18 off of the dolly. I said we were going to use explosives. And what those families heard and what the governor's team heard was I was going to go out and create a mushroom cloud in the Patapsco River. That's not what we meant. And we had a fluent Spanish speaker on our team, a young Army captain who put together an animation, translated it in Spanish, and we took that to the families and then the governor's team to help clean that up. But I think we could always do better speaking to Congress, to the administration, and to the public in plainer English.
Can you both speak to whether your agency maintains data on which bridges in the United States have this protective infrastructure in place and which ones do not?
Sir, we don't have the data, but I would just add to your comment, this bridge was completed in 1977. The Neo-Panamax type vessels like the Dolly showed up in our waterways 40 years later. And so the concrete dolphins that were out there protecting Pier 17 and 18 and the fendering were clearly not sufficient for vessels of that size.
And do you feel this situation exists in other places?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. That has been a key focus for us since the FSK disaster. There's about 620,000 bridges in our national bridge inventory. About 4,000 of those, give or take, have, as part of the inspection process, we require states to look at the dolphins and fenders and other pieces. We are working with AASHTO and the NTSB right now to get that full inventory looked at to see which bridges have the up-to-date protection and what can be done in order to bring them up to speed and up to code.
And if we are able to bring them up to code and install protective measures like these fenders, can the Is it possible for the Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund to be the source of funding to do that?
Happy to look into that and see if that, in addition to the Highway Trust Fund, would be an appropriate source of funding.
What is the Federal Highway Administration doing now to better protect bridges across our country that still lack adequate peer protection?
Thank you, Chairman Carper. Obviously, it's an incredibly important question. We have been in close contact with AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway Transportation Officials, just to get a better understanding of how many bridges are have exposure to vessels of this size. We are making them aware of all of the funding opportunities, both in the formula and discretionary grant programs. I will say the Bridge Large program, or the Bridge program, the Bridge Improvement Program is obviously oversubscribed. We do have a funding shortfall, so it's both identifying the needs that are out there and then finding funding priority to address those needs. And we're going to continue to work closely with the NTSB as they provide their recommendations as to what the appropriate level of protection. As we know, there were dolphins on this bridge, but we're not successful in protecting the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
Thank you. General Spellman, looking back on the disaster water, some of the major safety measures that the Corps would recommend taking while the Federal Highway Administration and Congress work together on addressing this safety concern.
Yes, sir. And I think we will take the lead of the National Transportation Safety Board. As I mentioned, their report that they released in mid-May, the bulk of that report talked about the vessel and the electronics, but there is a section in the back on bridge safety and resilience against collisions that we had here. Everything from fendering and larger and more dolphins. Those are the large concrete cylinders that you saw during your visit that we anchor into the bottom of the river to protect those important piers. I think as we do what we call our Section 408 reviews for new bridges and navigation channels, that we in the Corps have to take a harder look at those safety measures and work with our state and federal partners to make sure that they are in fact implemented.
There has been precedent in this administration to use alternative arrangements to waive NEPA and other environmental regulations to build projects for emergency response. The administration used alternative arrangements to waive the NEPA and bypass standards of the standard compliance process to establish the emergency migrant housing encampment in Floyd Bennett Field, the 1,450-acre National Park Service facility in New York City. And they did that in less than 2 weeks. So does this administration plan to use alternative arrangements to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I'm not aware of waiving NEPA. What we will do is we will issue a categorical exclusion because we're replacing a bridge in essentially the same footprint as the pre-existing one, and we'll work with the Corps and other resource agencies to get that done.
And so how much time do you think that will save to do the categorical exclusion?
98% of our projects are categorical exclusion, so it's a very quick determination.
And does this only have to be used, can it only be used in emergency situations?
No, the vast majority of our projects that are within an existing highway footprint are categorical exclusions. This is when you get into an EIS, environmental impact statement, or an EA, an environmental assessment, where you just have more impacts and more study is required.
And then I want to go back to another question I asked earlier. When you changed the designation for the bridge to the interstate highway system, under what authority did you do that?
Under the authority of the Federal Highway Administration. There's a process that we follow where the state says, we'd like this redesignated. It happens quite a bit. And we have to go through and say, here are the design exceptions that we would approve. So I would assume it's under Title 23.
But there's a process. Did you follow that process for the Francis Scott Key Bridge?
Absolutely.
So we have put out the RFP, as was mentioned, roughly 2 months after the fall of the bridge. We have gotten the responses to those, and we're reviewing those now. The next phase will be we will hire a general engineers contractor, basically, in effect, the engineers to oversee this. That will go out in the next few weeks, and we'll have that decision late summer. And then we've also processed what we call the CMI, which is the construction management inspection portion of the future bridge. So we're doing that contract now. We're preparing that contract now, and we'll have that in early fall. All this is the stage to get this done as quickly as possible, given the significant impact it has on the local community and the Northeast Corridor.
I saw the team at work and what they did to get the port opened earlier than anyone anticipated. I have a great deal of confidence in Secretary Wiedefeld and Governor Moore. We're going to get that bridge put up as quickly as possible because we recognize the significance, not only to our state, but to the entire country of that bridge being replaced quickly. So that is one of our principal focuses, do it right, but to do it as quickly as possible.
Let's see, you said the Corps spent approximately $65 million for wreckage removal and emergency. This came from annual operations and maintenance funding for the Port of Baltimore and through the use of the Corps' Emergency Reprogramming Authority. However, the supplemental transmitted to Congress only asks for $33 million for the Corps. Why is the supplemental request only for 33 when the Corps spent 65? And will the 33 million only be used to replenish annual operations and maintenance funding for the Port of Baltimore?
Yes, ma'am, let me explain. Our initial estimate to clear the 700-foot by 50-foot deep channel was $100 million. We're going to land that, we're in final demobilization now. It's going to come in at about $74 million. So we started off, we used $52 million from Baltimore Harbor, O&M, to not remove sediment, but to remove steel and concrete. And then I mentioned in my opening statement, we went out and canvassed unused and aged Harbor Maintenance Trust Fund O&M dollars from 220 projects across the nation, and we garnered $33 million to put against that effort. Okay. So I don't need the full, it's part of the supplemental request. We want to award, we have sediment further up the channel that we now have to deal with, and we're asking for $33 million to recoup what we spent on steel and concrete, and that will allow us to, if we get that near the end of this fiscal year, that'll allow us to stay on award for our next dredging contract, which we would like to award in October.
All right, with that, I think this hearing is adjourned. All right.